Ahoy friends, welcome to Building the Alpha Dory. I'm Dan and this is a project to build a Chamberlain Alpha racing dory along the lines that John Gardner published in his dory book. Illustrations by Sam Manning. Alright, well let's get out into the shop and get to it. Okay, so last video we scarfed up this #1 plank, and then after we did that we actually faired the stem here, trimmed the port garboard so that it overlaps, passes by the starboard garboard, and actually forms the front of the stem, which is going to cut the sea. We'll eventually round that over a little bit, and I beveled this face to match this face here on the starboard garboard, so that the port garboard essentially becomes an extension of this bevel angle as well. And that'll allow the next plank to lay on smooth, and you'll see how we build this up as it goes up the stem. So I think the next thing to do is probably check out the glue joint on the first plank that we laid up, and see how that looks. And we know we're going to have to straighten the edge of this plank, so we'll see how much we need to take off to do that. I want to see if I can cut out a little bit of pith that's along that edge, and maybe lose a knot hole or two in the process. But yeah, let's yank the nails and get it up off the floor, see how it turned out. Good. Nice and tight along that edge. And this edge looks like it's down tight to the wood. So yeah, hopefully we got a good scarf joint there. So I think what we'll do next is set this thing on the boat, which is how you go about spiling planking on a dory. No spiling batten. It's just well, if you had a high production shop, I guess you'd have patterns for each plank, which would make things a little bit easier. But other than that, you're just spiling directly onto the plank that you're going to be cutting and putting on the boat, hanging on the boat. So there is no batten or anything. It's just spiling directly onto the actual board. So let's give that a shot. Yeah, so we had some interesting questions on the comments section. Yeah, a number of them which I could probably speak for a little while about. Maybe the most complicated one was a question about seaworthiness and trying to compare a swamp skit, and I'm kind of assuming an alpha dory hull, because there's a fairly wide range in shape and performance among swamp skits even. So trying to compare swamp skit dory to Centennial, which is a old style Banks dory that was decked over and sailed across the Atlantic Ocean in the 1870s. So yeah, and so, like, all things being equal, but the thing is, just about nothing's equal in that comparison. So yeah, so the question becomes, how do you compare those boats? So I think for, if they were two open boats, sailing and rowing, say like a big Banks dory, a 20-footer, versus an alpha dory, 21-foot swamp skit type, which is kind of fined out a bit. I think the swamp skit would, and this is sailing and rowing. Now you throw a motor into the mix and things change a bit. I think then the Banks dory might gain a little ground, but between sailing and rowing, I think the swamp skit is going to be more seaworthy. Not so much that it can survive larger waves, but just the fact that you can control it with either oars or a sail in more extreme conditions. And primarily that's because you got lower freeboard on a swamp skit dory than on a Banks dory. Also, you've got more initial stability. Now, dories aren't huge on initial stability anyway, but a swamp skit dory's got more power to it. So it's got more power to stand up to the sail. So you'll be a little bit better off controlling it in heavy weather with the sail, and it's got lower sides, so you won't have quite as much wind blowing you. You won't have quite as much wind blowing you if you're trying to row the thing. And now this is all basically, seaworthiness is basically, I'm relating it to ability to make way against the wind, go to windward, so you could get off of, say, a lee shore or wherever you were getting blown. Now, if you're out in the ocean with hundreds of miles between you and the closest land, and you were just drifting in like survival conditions, I think maybe the Banks dory would be a little bit better off. It's really, kind of tough to tell, but that's what they were built for, and they were famous for that. You got a little bit higher sides, so you might get a little bit less spray on board. I think they both perform pretty as well as could be hoped for in breaking waves, which is never where you want to get any of them. You don't want to get a boat into breaking waves if it's at all possible, which it should be possible not to do such a crazy thing. So at that point, yeah, I'm kind of going by ability to make way to weather, ability to go upwind and get you off of, if you got a mud flat downwind and you're going to get blown up on the flats and there's, maybe breaking chop and you'll be stuck there for a couple hours or who knows what. So, but, like all of these things should be able to be mitigated by seamanship as well. You don't want to put your boat into a situation where the difference between a banks door and a swampscot door is what gets you out of trouble. Like if you put yourself in that situation to start with, you're in bad shape. But yeah, anyway, so there's a lot to talk about on that, and yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation. Yeah, so I got to open the door to get this plank around to the other side of the boat, which is where it's going to go on. And it's raining out. So looks like that scarf joint is holding so far, which is a good sign. You can see these planks get a little bit tricky to handle. They're almost like spaghetti once they get thin. So no steaming necessary to get these on the boat. They're just they're flexible enough to bend on without breaking. Yeah, but anyway, so then the question was, well, what's more seaworthy, Centennial or an Alpha Dory with a deck on it? That's what this guy wanted to know in the comment section. That's the question. So, yeah, that's an interesting thought. A lot of it kind of depends on the deck. What kind of deck are you putting on the Swampscot Dory? Because you'll still have those capabilities of the Swampscot. But now the other thing with Centennial, that's a totally different ball of wax, because Centennial has ballast in her. And when I was initially comparing, say, the Banks Dory versus the Swampscot, so the Banks Dory is going to be less stable because it's got higher sides, more weight up high, and it's got a narrower water line. The bottom isn't narrower. The bottom's probably wider, but it doesn't flare or anything like the Swampscot Dory does, and it doesn't have those rounded that knuckle in the side to take up buoyancy quickly when it heels. So a Banks Dory will go right over till the rail is right at the water, and that's where it'll sort of stiffen up. But if you're sailing an open boat, an open Banks Dory with no ballast, the rail goes over the water where it stiffens up, and then the water's coming in, if you just let it go an inch or two further. So they're pretty unforgiving. And when you're sailing a boat, once it's over that far, then you're starting to slip sideways a little bit anyway, which tends to, if you put the rail under, it'll push water into the boat. And you're over at such an angle of heel that your centerboard isn't grabbing as well. And then if the wind lightens up and you're up on the high side, all of a sudden the boat tips back in the other direction, which Swampscots will do that too. So yeah. So anyway, with the ballast on board, the Banks Dory becomes a completely different animal. Much more stable, and when it goes over on its side, its side, you know, like I was saying, that when that side hits the water, it firms up like crazy. Now with Centennial, she's got a deck. So the side goes over, hits the water, she firms up like crazy, and you've got a fully decked boat. So now all of a sudden you're not worried about taking water over the rail, because if it comes over the rail, which I've had the rail like go to the water on Centennial once, and I was in some pretty gusty weather. And as far as going under the water, I haven't had it happen. That's how stiff she is. And you know, I know how to sail the boat too, so. But yeah, so all of a sudden it's kind of a different calculation when you've got a ballasted bank story versus a an empty boat, which is what they've always written about the bank stories, out on the fishing grounds. They fill them with fish and then sail them back. They wouldn't sail them out. They'd get dropped off by the schooner to go out. But once that bank story is full of fish, and the hull gets down in the water, then it can hang on to windward even without a centerboard, because it's got all that hull down in the water, basically like an old English cutter or whatever. You basically got a big hull down deep. That's what's keeping you from sliding sideways. And at that point, once it gets down, also the sides are flared out, so you got a wider water line at that point as well. And just the inertia keeps the boat from being as tippy, as tiddly side to side. So yeah, it's something interesting to consider, though, when you're thinking about which door you may want to build. So it's always a bit of a trick to get these things get these clamps to pull in. Sometimes I'll actually use a rope back here to pull the transom in, just because it tends to grab the yoke pretty good. Okay, so what I just did was put a clamp on the transom to keep this clamp from sliding. We're close to where we want to be there. What I want to do is grab one of my longer Jorgensen clamps I can get this thing to bring the side in, otherwise I'll go with a kickstick. Getting there, but not quite far enough. So yeah, let's find some of those kicksticks and see if we can get a couple of those in. Here's one, not sure if it's long enough. We shall see. What I can do is put a piece of blocking in with it, which will definitely help a bit. Alright, that's getting close. Let's see if we can go down here a little bit further. Ooh, there we go. I may want to put some cross balls on this. Looks like it's starting to put a lot of pressure on that frame there. But we're looking good up here, so that's a plus. Gonna have to come down. Which may help. This may be too high up front. So that's helped a lot, lowering this, lowering the plank at the stem. Yeah, you can see how this came in. Thinking I want to shift this ahead maybe 2 inches. Slid it. So we're good there. Yeah, what I may do is put a couple cross balls down here right now. that, or I could put them off the ceiling, one of the two. I think that's going to be enough to do it. See this one longer than that one. No, about the same one. Okay, so let's get the tape measure out and see how we're doing for height along the frames. Yeah, that one looked like it was about to go. Alright, so how we doing? Just took some of the pressure off this frame here, and yeah, so what I think I'll do now is I can clamp this crossbowl here, clamp it here to here. See that I could get something a little bit longer and clamp it back to the strong back there. Yep, this thing's gonna have to move. And this will provide plenty of strength so that the yoke doesn't start moving around on the bottom. Yeah, see, that'll keep that from moving.